Sometimes everything seems to be going well, perfectly normal, until, just when you least expect it, life delivers something that you could never have seen coming. For so long, Darcy Miller had lived a relatively normal life. To many, there was little remarkable about her, little that would stand out. One day, however, Darcy Miller suffered a horrific accident that would change her body and her life. Now, she has a story that few people would be able to share. It was the fall of 2015. Darcy was at home doing basic yard work. At the same time, she was also burning trash to clean up her yard when she found herself suddenly engulfed by the gas fumes. At that moment, she had no idea what could have caused the fumes to fire in her direction. The first thing that came over her was the complete and utter confusion. After all the times she had done this, what had she done to end up in this mess? Shortly after, the panic followed. But she soon reminded herself that she could deal with this. Initially, she thought that she could remain calm, that she would be able to keep control. Within seconds, she was masked by the darkness that had formed around her. Within an instant, it was as though Darcy had found herself at the heart of a great maze. Already, she felt the thoughts flooding through her mind. It was the last thing that she needed right now. She needed direction, someone to reach out to her as she screamed and flailed. Nothing came. There was no escape in sight, with the ghastly walls closing in at a rapid speed. Her heart thumped against her chest as she was forced to a dreadful conclusion. This was the end. She had made a terrible mistake, and now there was nobody who could come to save her. It didn't take long for the darkness to consume her entirely. There was surely nowhere to go from here. The room that appeared before her now was basic and clinical. She had always hated hospitals. It was everything about. As much as she knew that the people who worked there were selfless and fantastic, she would never be able to get over everything else. It was the scent, the over-cleanliness that made her feel as though she had just been quarantined. Now, she feared that this disgust came from something else entirely. It was the idea that places like this represented something terrible, her freedom being taken away. Finally, the nightmare had been realized all at once. Her body was frozen as she awoke. Every part of her felt as though it had been locked down, trapped to the bed on which she lay. Was she dreaming now? Had she moved on? Darcy really felt the will to panic now, to scream at the top of her lungs. And yet, nothing came. It was a strange sensation, almost calming in a way. Deep down, she felt that there was nothing she could do. Now, however, it was a fact that she accepted. The only thing that she could remember from the first days was the white that covered everything. Even though she couldn't feel a thing, this always made her cringe internally. Already, Darcy found herself plotting her escape. The real world couldn't wait for long. This was to be the beginning of a very difficult process. Indeed, it was one that needed to be completed if Darcy was to be nursed back to health. She was hospitalized for 3 weeks and underwent multiple surgeries to help get back the range of motion in her neck and arms. "It's had its major ups and downs," she told Fox 59. "It's a mental struggle. It's a physical struggle. There's lots of therapy." "I was in a coma for 9 days, Miller said. She would always remember those difficult days, the ones that never seemed to end at times. Darcy would think back to her first impressions of physical therapy. Even though she always felt sympathy for those who had suffered great injuries and needed to get back to their usual selves, she could never be rid of a sense of jealousy. Looking back now, she could fully appreciate how childish she had been. Perhaps she really had been that interested in the idea of rediscovering one's body, all of the movements coming back to you day by day. Although the idea seemed cool to her all that time ago, the real thing was hell on earth. As she raised her arm on that first day of the process, she simply had to force her mind elsewhere. As soon as she accepted that the pain was her reality, only further agony would ensue. It was the kind of pain that melted you, the kind of pain that made her wish she had never woken up. As messed up as it sounded, it was the truth. She hated this altogether. For a beautiful moment, as she felt that her arm had been extended fully, Darcy experienced something even more magical. There was a shiver that coursed through her fingers. It was as though she was playing an invisible piano. Even through the excruciating pain that stalked her every movement, this was a day that supported the rest of her progress almost on its own. Darcy would picture her facial expressions as she tried to beat the progress she had made on the previous days. The fear and agony was always etched into the folds of her face, the suffering slowly becoming more ingrained in her. No matter how rewarding this time was as her health improved, she knew that there was nothing she wouldn't give to go back to that fateful day. Oh, what she wouldn't give to snap her fingers and live a normal life. Having suffered from severe burns all over her chest and her arms, now after being treated and released at their local burn center, Darcy decided to head out for some much-needed fun and relaxation with her fiancé Jason. When she was finally able to leave, it felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Of course, the team at the center had informed her that this would happen. It was the level of elation that most people experienced as they went back into the real world, now ready to live the life that they had left behind. Naturally, there was no way for her to describe this feeling of discovery. Everything was new again, and she was going to enjoy every bit of it. They decided that a trip to the Indianapolis Zoo was in order, so off they went. While they were there, they headed over to the primate exhibit to observe the animals behind the glass. As much as it was bliss to see her partner again, out in the real world, there were things on that day that overwhelmed Darcy even further. She was as childlike and innocent as ever, plunged into a world where nothing seemed to make sense. It was a fantastic dream, with animals of all varieties everywhere she looked. She had no idea where to begin as the pair made their way through. Luckily, a 12-year-old orangutan named Rocky happened to find her eye. It was more than the tropical nature of the creature, an animal unlike anything that she had seen before. Of course, all of this was made more strange by the fact that she had just been released from her treatment. There was something else. While the rest of the orangutans behind the glass seemed to be quite happy doing their own thing, this one in particular was intent on observing the woman as she walked by. There was no fierce or fearful expression on the animal's face as it watched. It was simply taking in the new information, puzzled by what was coming toward him. The ape stared as the visitor from Greencastle, Indiana, roamed around his exhibit. Miller was burned by gas fumes while doing yard work, and her arms and chest were covered in bandages after receiving her treatment at the nearby burn treatment center. She quickly realized that the orangutan was taking a very keen interest in her. It was now an expression of true curiosity that she saw. It didn't take Darcy long to figure out what was going on. The animal was struggling to understand why she looked so different to everybody else in the zoo. It was probably weird enough that all of the humans were wearing clothes. But now, there was something else. She had her bandages, the marks of the dreadful damage that she had experienced. Already, there was movement from the animal that was inspecting her. He walked away from the group he was interacting with to come up to a secluded window. Now curious themselves, Darcy and Jason walked over to it. What happened next was definitely something magical. As soon as Darcy got close to the glass that kept the two from touching, the 12-year-old orangutan, known as Rocky, began to closely examine her bandages. The expression on the orangutan's face had now changed once more. Darcy would always be able to recall the sensation that came over her as the animal examined her. No longer was it puzzled by what it was seeing. It was something far greater than that. There was a level of understanding there, the knowledge that she had been hurt and that she needed to be cared for. In that very moment, it was all that she could see in the creature's eyes. Almost instantly, she felt the will to cry, wanting to reach out to the animal and let it know of her gratitude. Naturally, everyone else in the zoo on that day had been awfully polite, treating her with the full respect that she deserved. Behind all of their words together, she knew that they were questioning her appearance. Darcy had already become slightly upset by the refusal of others to acknowledge her appearance. As much as they were just being polite, something inside her could not get over the fakeness of it all. The orangutan that stood before her now broke through all of that. His honesty shone through. It was just another being that wanted to know the truth, and clearly one that cared for her. As these realizations came to her, Darcy could no longer help the tears. She had found hope in the place where she was least expecting it. He left the group he was interacting with and came over to a secluded window, Miller told CBS News. We went over to that window and he immediately wanted to see everything I had going on. The curious ape closely examined Miller's neck. He would lean back and then get close to the glass in order to get a better look. He wants you to show him, her partner said as he taped the incredible interaction. That's crazy. He wants to see it. Darcy was happy to oblige the curious orangutan. She carefully peeled away her bandages to show Rocky the burns and scars on her arms and chest. Rocky took an even bigger interest in her, pressing himself up closer to them through the glass and pointing at her chest and arms. As the primate kept up his interest, more and more people gathered around them to watch this amazing show, gasping as they watched every move. "Is this normal?" she asked. "Yeah, this is normal for Rocky," a zookeeper standing nearby replied. As amazing as this moment was to Darcy, she still found it difficult to stay calm and composed. Every few seconds, she would exchange glances between the zookeeper, Jason, and, of course, the orangutan that had decided to see what she was up to. Even though she knew that she was quite safe with the help of those around her, nothing could stop the feeling that things could still go badly wrong. It was the dreadful anxiety creeping in again, a sensation that she had only discovered when the accident had happened. Throughout her entire life, she had never really been worried about anything, especially the things that she couldn't control. She had always known that life was better without these worries. But now, however, she felt this thought process wash away completely. Darcy clung to Jason as the orangutan studied her even further, seemingly desperate to know the reason behind her different appearance. Of course, with all the bandages, she looked little like the rest of the people who had congregated around the glass window. This was surely something that the animal had never seen before in its life. The pair studied each other for 20 minutes before Costello started recording the interaction. He was pointing at everything, Miller said. I was told he doesn't know sign language, but in my opinion, it was clear he knew something. He was engulfed in everything I had going on. It had to be a fluke, Miller thought. She left the exhibit, determined to pay Rocky one last visit before she left, just to be sure. Sure enough, as soon as she returned, Rocky met her at the window. The image that Darcy saw was just the exact same. In no time at all, the orangutan had separated itself from the rest of his friends, desperate to get to the window to see the new friend that he had made. For the first few moments of the interaction, the looks on his face were the very same as before. There were flickers of curiosity and wonder as the animal tried to figure out the puzzle that he had been shown before. There was something else this time as well, something that even shocked Darcy as she greeted her orangutan friend. After the animal had established once again that this was not an ordinary person, but in fact someone that he had bonded with only a few days before, there came a spring of joy. His eyes were alight with the idea of meeting someone once again. To him, this clearly indicated a friendship, the thing that he had always craved during his time here. Darcy met Rocky's smile with her own, sure to show the same enthusiasm as she stood by the window. Just as the first time, this was a beautiful moment for her, and one that she would remember for the rest of her life. Never once had she considered finding a true friend in someone that lived behind a glass window, let alone someone who was from another species entirely. Even through her own happiness, however, she could not help but wonder, what was it about this animal that made it so different, so curious and caring about her? She knew already that orangutans were among the most intelligent primates, so she expected some level of human understanding from them. However, this was something on another level entirely. This orangutan didn't just understand humans in general, it understood her. As the dots connected in her mind, she felt the magic once more. For the first time since the accident, she felt a deep appreciation for her life and experience. As painful as all of this had been, Darcy had held on to those that she loved and had found that there were many wonders in this world that she just hadn't seen. It was a mistake that she vowed never to make again. From now on, she was sure to live life with complete purpose. It was the only way to see all the wonders that she could. "I've always seen videos of it happening, and it's never happened to me," Miller said. "I'd always say this isn't true, this isn't real. That's why I said I wanted to go back to see if he'd remember me. And he did. It was pretty amazing." Internet users agreed. The video has garnered nearly 2.5 million views since it was posted on July 26th. But the zoo wasn't entirely surprised by Rocky's behavior. In fact, this was far from the first time that the 12-year-old orangutan had made others feel special. Ever since Rocky had been placed under the zoo's care, he had seemingly taken the time to get to know everyone around him. At first, this had started his neighbouring orangutans, who occasionally carried illnesses and injuries. Often, before any of the zoo staff were able to get to the ailed animal, Rocky had already rushed to them to offer help. After that, the then young orangutan would rush to the staff to indicate what had happened. One of his carers remembered when one of the older orangutans had injured themselves. Being one of the more established members of the group, it later became clear the animal was afraid of asking for help, too proud to do so. Even when some of the staff were sure that something was wrong, they did not immediately feel the need to rush down to the enclosure to find out what had happened. For them, this was way too much of a risk. Even breaking the schedule of their animals in the slightest could throw off the trust that had been established. This was a risk that simply couldn't be taken. Of course, all of the staff were nervous as they watched on, still trying to figure out what they could do to help. Soon enough, however, they found that they already had everything that they needed. At first, they thought that Rocky was trying to knock on the glass that stood beside the enclosure entrance. It was bizarre. As intelligent as they knew these creatures to be, this was the kind of the thing that they expected to see in movies. Animals, even the most gifted ones, never really acted in this way. By Rocky's side, he held on to the elder orangutan, whose face was vacant and waiting for the help that it knew it needed. From this moment on, it was totally clear to everyone who worked there that there was something different about Rocky. Something that, even amongst other special animals, made him quite unique. Everyone at the zoo wanted to be his carer, just so that they could get a closer look at his development as he progressed as a member of the group. Everywhere he went, everyone else seemed to follow. "Our orangutans eagerly interact and communicate with people they know well, such as their caregivers," the zoo said in a statement. "Rocky is a bit different. He regularly interacts with people he may not know." The exchange in the video is a great example of this. Zookeepers aren't sure what exactly was running through his mind at the time, but they can tell he was trying to communicate. Many of the staff continue to comment on just how different Rocky is and are determined to ensure that he is looked after for the rest of his life. Everyone at the zoo agrees that animals such as these have so much more value than just being an exhibit. Crucially, animals like Rocky have the ability to boost the well-being of everyone and all the animals around them. It's a truly magical scenario where everyone wins. Of course, this is exactly the kind of situation that zoos the world over want to foster. This is the kind of thing that makes life easier for everyone. Could you imagine working in a zoo where the animals make a real effort to befriend others? How incredible would that be? In many ways, this is another reason why animals like Rocky are so crucial in cultivating an amazing zoo culture. When there are animals like this who need care in zoos, these organizations are able to hire the best people possible to support their operations. This, in turn, allows the zoo to provide the best services possible to the animals that they house. The official said that Rocky shows a clear sense of urgency in the video as he gestures toward Miller's injuries. "His behavior demonstrates strong interest and concern," the zoo added. "There is no doubt that this was an important interaction for him, and his gestures to the woman clearly communicate that." Following the series of interactions that Darcy had with the orangutan, the zoo was sure to reach out to her, stating that they were deeply grateful for the care that she had also shown to the animal. They noted that she also helped Rocky greatly by expressing care and respect towards him. His carer also added to the letter that was sent to Darcy, letting her know that it had taken him a while to gain Rocky's full respect and trust. In her case, this process had taken little more than a few minutes. It was a truly incredible thing that very few in the team had experienced before. With that being said, the zookeepers extended an invitation to Darcy, letting her know that she was welcome back to Indianapolis Zoo whenever she wished to visit, free of charge. Of course, as much as their staff were qualified and trained, there was little that could replace the organic interactions that occurred between herself and the animal that they were responsible for. This was exactly the kind of thing that kept their animals happy and healthy, developing new relationships with new people. Darcy only just felt the tears as she set the letter down beside her. Just like the accident that had happened all that time ago, this was something else that she could never have anticipated. It felt like only days ago that she was trapped within the confines of that dreadful hospital, and now she had formed a bond with a member of another species. It was a moment that had now garnered millions of views and likes online. What had her life become? There were times when all of the new attention became a little overwhelming. It was in these moments that Jason became especially helpful. As much as she was overcome with the entire experience, he had always been there to ensure that she was in a good mental state. She was determined to never forget what he did for her during these days. It was similar to the level of gratitude that she expressed towards Rocky. She was forced to wonder where she would be without these two after everything that had happened recently. From that day on, Darcy made a commitment to visiting Rocky every few months. In their new house, the pair kept a couple of pictures of the legendary orangutan, a reminder of the animal that had reintroduced hope into Darcy's life. Her personal favourite would be the one that lay just across from the dining table. It was a group photo. Darcy still recalled the nerves that she had felt on that day. Even though she knew that there was a bond between her and Rocky, this was something completely unknown. What if she had been wrong about this all along? Was this really a risk worth taking? She guessed that there was only one way to find out. Regardless, it was far too late now. Moments later, the entire team had gathered into the space. The rest of the orangutans had gathered to watch as Rocky made his way toward his human friends gleefully. Much to Darcy's delight, the orangutan was clearly pleased to see her beyond the glass barrier and was even more elated that she was no longer covered in bandages. It was a level of consideration that she couldn't expect from even the best of people. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with your friends and family. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.